So without further ado, everybody please welcome Jasmin Rivas. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Margaret. I'd like to start our conversation, and hopefully it's a discussion and it isn't just me, a talking head standing up here. But I usually like to start almost every workshop or every conversation that we have around equity and around social justice with these norms. And today's no different. We ask ourselves to embrace discomfort. A lot of times these conversations people have really strong opinions about, and we come from all different experiences around equity and social justice, and even definitions. People have different ideas. And so we want to make sure that we're embracing moments of discomfort, and that's okay. We're learning when we are out of our comfort zone, although we don't want people to be in a panic and run out of here. There's a fine line, and we want to stay within that yellow zone where we're out of our comfort zone, and we are challenging ourselves to learn. Trusting intent and naming impact. In DEIA and equity work, this is really important. I do a lot of work with young people and students, and we always tend to think about, well, I didn't mean that. That's not what I meant. But we really want to focus on the impact. And when someone says that something was hurtful to them, or that you did or said something, that we want to keep focus on our impact on the other person and not necessarily on our intent. And even though we might not mean something, we want to make sure that we're open to listening to other people and how something we've done or said comes across to someone else. Being honest with ourselves and others. A lot of this work is really about reflection and examining our own thoughts and our own experiences and our own learning. And so that is a lot of having to do with being honest, where some of our ideas come from, acknowledging judgments and assumptions, including and especially our own, accepting that things may remain unresolved. We might not feel a sense of closure. One conversation about equity, about social justice, isn't going to be the be-all, end-all of this work. And being comfortable and continuing to have conversations with people of all walks of life, people that have different ideas than us, is really important for us to be able to learn and stretch our learning. So a little brief introduction about a little bit about me and my background. I've been doing this work even before I thought about DEIA in any sense. I've always been doing work, even as a child in school, and defending other students who were being bullied because they were different, or standing up to people because I was being bullied because I was different, because of my hair, or the way I talked, or whatever it might be. And so I didn't have the words then, and now we have the words and the academic language, but we all sort of do this work in instances where we are defending each other, where we are making sure that people are included. That is all work that revolves around equity, and we don't always recognize that is what we're doing. I can remember when I worked in the district attorney's office back in the late 90s, early 2000s, all of this was encompassed in the word diversity. And so there were some trainings that I had to run for other staff, and we would have these videos that we had to play for people, and they had X's and O's. I don't know, I'm dating myself, and certainly some people might remember those HR videos that I had to run discussions and engage people in conversations about what it meant. What did diversity mean? What does it mean to have a workplace where we are accepting of all of our different identities and people feel welcome? And so it wasn't until I became the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Access at Old Sturbridge Village that I actually received a certificate in DEIA work through Cornell University. And so now there was a title, there was, official schooling around it, but all of that work, all of the work I did in Southbridge Public Schools revolved around equity work and making sure that students received what they needed, where they were at, working with students with disabilities, working with ELL students, and making sure that students were not being excluded, discriminated against. I taught sexual health and making sure that our LGBTQIA students could see themselves in the curriculum and were able to navigate all of those conversations around relationships. Again, being inclusive and making sure that students could see themselves in what I was teaching. And so many things have happened in history, throughout history, whether we talk about abolition in the 1800s or thinking about the civil rights movement, that our C.A.R.E coalition celebrated the 60th anniversary of the civil rights movement this past fall, where our activators, students, our high school students, presented a talk and talked about the history and what that meant to them and how the work that the leaders of the civil rights movement started at that time continues today, and how our students are set to take over the mantle and continue that work. And so that was a really impactful presentation at the Boston Common at the MLK Embrace Monument, and our students did an incredible job talking about what it meant to them. And I'm so hopeful to the future, because students and young people really carry this work, and the students that I work with every day, and Stella and I work with every day, really are passionate about this work and being able to continue the work in all of their own communities. So a little bit about C.A.R.E that I want to talk about. So the Coalition for Anti-Racism and Equity is it is a 501c3 nonprofit organization with an amazing group of board members and people that came together around inclusive histories and inclusive curriculum for K through 12. And a few years ago, they made a movement to get a bill passed in the legislature to bring ethnic studies into our K through 12 curriculum across the state. And so from that movement, I'm going to switch over to our website. And here's our website. And it really talks about teaching us history, all of it, right? And including all of the parts of history and telling stories from all different cultures, from all different people that contributed to the history of our country. And here, a collective of proactive individuals with a wide range of expertise, and our board has an incredible depth of expertise in all different areas, education, law, and improving the lives of our children, promoting racially inclusive K through 12 curriculum, and coming together, fostering inclusivity and truth in the educational system. In particular, I work with the Leadership Next Gen program and the Activators program. We work with college age and high school students and helping them learn about leadership around social justice and civic engagement. I know that as a town councilor, we're always talking about participation and the lack of participation, especially young people in our community who don't participate or who are turned off. And we really want to think about cultivating our leadership for the future and getting young people engaged in civic roles and running for office. And that is what Leadership Next Gen does. We have 16 students in our cohort this spring from various parts of Massachusetts, and they get to engage in a Commonwealth seminar We partner with Commonwealth Seminar, and they learn about the legislative process. And they also learn about budgeting, how a bill becomes law in the State House, all of those different dynamics. They get to learn that. And then we partner with elected officials and community-based organizations in their communities and outside their communities, where they get to participate for 6 to 8 weeks with an elected official. They spend time in an internship with an elected official, and then 6 to 8 weeks with a community-based organization. So they're getting a viewpoint from inside, right? Inside the State House or inside their municipal government, but also from a grassroots perspective as well. So thinking about all the different issues and the things that are important to us, whether it's housing, whether it is making sure that all of our neighbors are safe, and things around immigration and worrying about deportation and making sure that people that we care about are taken care of, whether it's our trans friends and neighbors, that they are safe and that they don't have to be fearful, and our students, and keeping students safe and making sure that our students have information and resources. And so our students are learning all of those different parts, different components, so that they can make a difference in their own communities and beyond in all parts of Massachusetts. So that is a program that I'm really proud to be part of, and I'm learning a lot from Stella and our other board members. And at the end of their fellowship in June, they get to present at a day of action at the State House, where they present a capstone project that is informed by their experiences with elected officials and with their community-based organizations. And so I hope in the next year that we get more students from Southbridge. We have quite a few. We have a few students from Worcester, and we hope to expand into Western Mass as well. I know that you mentioned earlier Western Mass, and we want to be sure that we provide opportunities for students across the state, because students are passionate about this work, and we want to make sure that they have access to the programs. And so a little bit more about C.A.R.E. There is also an educator component, and a little bit later I'll talk about an educator professional development opportunity that some of our board members put together around anti-racism education. And there are some dates in March and April that some professionals, educators that we work with put together and are providing, and they're, it's going to be an incredible opportunity for educators, and it is free. Often, we have to pay for those conferences and that education, and it will be free to educators around New England. So I will share more information about that. And so those are our components of C.A.R.E. We work with young people, we work with educators, and then we have a C.4 branch that works on the advocacy around the inclusive curriculum bill. It is www.care4equity.org. So I'm going to go over some definitions. I know that it's, hot topic, a lot of controversy around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And yes, we should be using all of the words and not just the acronyms. Thinking about diversity historically, before, like I said, in my roles, it was all encompassed into that one word, diversity. There wasn't, a delineation of all these different aspects. And thinking about diversity, really, honestly, at the basic level, is that we're all different, and recognizing that we're all different, right? We all look different, we have different experiences, we come from different backgrounds, we're different heights, we're different ages, and so recognizing that we all come from different places and not centering one experience, whether that is in education, whether that is in the criminal justice system, whether that is in housing, thinking about that we acknowledge and recognize our differences. And that isn't something that is a detriment. It is an asset, because we are richer when we have all different perspectives. If we're all a monolith, first of all, that's boring. And second of all, that creates blind spots. If we are all coming from one perspective, it's hard to see a solution to something that we're all just looking at that problem in the same way. And so thinking about diversity, and especially in HR, when we think of this concept about merit being something outside of diversity, equity, and inclusion, that doesn't make any sense, right? And so people that work in HR are nodding and know that it isn't about giving someone a job because of their identity. It's really about making sure that the pool of candidates, that people have access, right? That it isn't, in thinking about the ways that we all come to different opportunities, right? It's sometimes a friend tells you about a job, right? And so making sure that we are sharing out the opportunities, that we're not just hoarding opportunity for our inner circles, right? That's part of diversity, right? That doesn't have anything to do with giving someone a job because of their skin color or because of their identity. And so making sure that in our approaches to hiring people and creating policies, we have guidelines. And you're thinking about, well, if I have this criteria, it isn't because, you went to Michigan State and I went to Michigan State, I'm going to hire that person, right? And so thinking about that, we have criteria that we're looking at that is objective. How is this person at communicating, right? And we are identifying the levels. Well, they were a great communicator. We're giving them a 5. Did they show you evidence that they've demonstrated that they are competent in the area that matches the job description, right? And that doesn't have anything to do with their identity. That has to do with their skill set and what they're coming into, their education, and making sure that we're not looking at someone's name on a resume and just throwing it away because we don't like that name, right? And that happens. There's so much research out there, whether it's in housing, redlining, and we can be here all night talking about redlining, and thinking about housing, and thinking about college admissions, and thinking about all of those different aspects where, someone would come in and would be told, oh no, we already rented that apartment. Or someone, blind research where they would have an application with the same credentials and the names were different, and the person with the different sounding name would not get an interview. And so those are the aspects, making sure people have opportunity, right? You either make or break it in your interview. No one's going to get a leg up in that way, right? So you're making sure that there is access and opportunity for everyone to be able to have access and be able to apply for that position. And so I wanted to clear that up and have people think about that a little bit, because we hear so many different things about misinformation about these definitions and about what this means. And equity, I downloaded this, so I thought this was great. And we often, I've done a workshop on equality and equity. And thinking about equality, so understanding equality, and I'm going to equate it to books because we're at the library. Equality is that everyone gets the same book. Okay, you get the same thing. Equity is that everyone gets the book that is right for them. And what does that mean? If I need bigger print, that book is going to have bigger print. If I need an audio book, I have an audio book, right? And that could be the same title, but that book is going to be tailored to my specific needs. And so that's how I kind of showcase the difference between equality and equity. And then inclusion, and exactly, what Jackie mentioned, making sure that not only people are at the table, right? Because if you're going to have people at the table and representation, and you're going to silence people, that's not really inclusion, right? We want to make sure that people have a seat at the table, but that they are heard at that table, and that people have the same opportunity to share their opinions and to share their perspectives, and that is truly inclusion, right? And so we want to distinguish that. The representation is having access and an opportunity to be at the table, right? That's diversity, diversifying who is at the table. And then inclusion, truly making sure people have a voice and that they're not silenced. And then the accessibility piece that Jean mentioned is also really important, and having access, right? And thinking about education is where that's a great example of that access, and where people had to sue the government, right? To make sure that they had access to education, and that students with disabilities and students from all walks of life have the same access to our educational system. This is a big one, critical race theory. There's so much out there on this, right? So I took this Merriam-Webster, tried and true definitions, a group of concepts and ideas, so that sociology rather than biological designation, and that racism used for examining the relationship between race and the laws and legal institutions of a country, especially the United States. And enough people have heard from legal scholars who brought this into the forefront, Kimberly Crenshaw, and thinking about in the criminal justice system, drug laws, right? And the war on drugs and policies around that, and mandatory minimums. And as we mentioned before, redlining. And so this is often a course that you would take in law school. And so thinking about the conversations people have around critical race theory in K through 12, there are adults that can't wrap their heads around these legal concepts and these legal theories and how these laws are examined, that would be very, very difficult even for a high schooler to be able to have a discussion about, even though we do have a lot of high schoolers that, might be able, might dig into this themselves. But a kindergartner, they're not going to be studying critical race theory. That doesn't make any sense. And so, and just, again, we can think about, my son is in community planning and development, and he does a lot of work reading about Robert Moses and transportation and some of the, the racism in creating our highway systems, right, and running them through Black communities. And so those are all examples of case studies and things that you would learn about in a critical race theory class in law school. Yeah, and there's certainly a lot of scholarly research on the intention behind it, right? To break up communities. And
that was their intention 50 years
yes,
ago? When
yes, yeah, yes. Some of them were very, some of them were very explicit about their intentions, Robert Moses in particular in New York. And so you can dig into that. My son is much more well versed in that scholarly, viewpoint around transportation. But yeah, some of it is, is in documentation that it was intentional. So those are some of the aspects that would be studied in a critical race theory. There is a book I have on audio by Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow, and that's a great book to study about what we're talking about here when it comes to the criminal justice system, and a lot of laws and a lot of cases that came before the Supreme Court, and a lot of cases talking about the war on drugs and drug policies and the disparate sentencing when it comes to drugs like cocaine and crack, right? And so that's the biggest example, and the sentencing that people would get much heavier sentences when it came to crack cocaine rather than cocaine, and that's basically the same drug, right? So a great book if you're if you want to follow up on that, and I'm sure Margaret can have some of those lists, can look those up and have those ready here. I also wanted to talk about belonging. That is another piece of the work that I have done in schools especially, and teachers and educators in our schools really think about belonging and making sure that all our students feel like they belong, right? And when we think about a workplace, we want everybody to feel like they belong and they're welcome so that they come to work. I don't know about you, but if I was an employer, I'd want people to come to work. So I want them to be productive and feel like they are contributing. And so I have a question for the audience. How can we work to make everyone feel like they belong? What are some things that you've done in your own capacity to make people feel like they belong, either in your workplace or out in the community?
I know what, when I was at a local dispensary here in town, when I was working there, we set up a diversity and inclusion committee specifically to make sure that different employees from different backgrounds were being heard, to make sure that they weren't shut out of the process. One thing that I felt was genuine from them was this concern about making sure that everybody has a seat at the table and that they're truly heard. It's not just the white owners who do everything. They actually wanted to make sure the community was heard, because that's who worked in their their factory and their business, right? Was people from the community who didn't look like them. So that was one of the first things that the company did, and it had a good impact overall. I felt like people were actually feeling heard for the first time in a long time in those types of businesses, especially around like financial decisions. A lot of minority groups are not included around those sensitive discussions, which can lead to reduced pay, benefits, etc. for those communities. Making sure they have a seat at the table was the first step to making sure we can address those issues, and those issues ended up coming up and were addressed. And that wouldn't have happened if we didn't have a group setting like that in which people could feel comfortable talking about those things.
Yeah, that's a great point. And and there's so much noise around this, where it's just a mechanism where people have access to having discussions and feeling safe that they can say something, right? Especially at your place of employment, that you're not afraid to get fired when you bring up an issue that might be a problem. Think about what you learned in kindergarten. I mean, I always go back to that. It's very simple. And if we were doing it, we wouldn't need all of these programs, right? If we were actually, if we lived by the words in the Constitution, right, we wouldn't need to have these discussions, but we don't. We don't live up to those ideals. And so we have to hold ourselves accountable. That's really what it is. It's holding ourselves accountable, and that can be uncomfortable, right? Because we have the best intentions, people aren't out here to hurt each other in general, right? In general. And so it's uncomfortable to think about something I said or did hurt this other person in such a way that they can't function, they want to hurt themselves. That is an uncomfortable feeling, and we need to reflect on ourselves and be able to have conversations internally about where was my blind spot? You know, where does that come from? Why did I react that way? Why did I say that to that person? Would I say that to someone, or would I do that to someone that looked just like me? That was just like me? And so those are questions that we need to ask ourselves. And a lot of times we're moving so fast, right? Our day just goes so quickly. We don't want to stop and think. Like, we don't want to think about anything. Fast food, fast fashion, it's fast. All that we're talking about here when we're talking about equity and inclusion and social justice is to take a step back and slow it down and think about our impact on other people and how we exist, right? Our relationships, our community. We don't exist in a little bubble that is just Jasmin existing in the world. That's not real, right? I exist in community, in communion with the people around me, and being aware of how I am impacting and how I am interacting with other people. That's all we're talking about, right? And learning about people who are different than I am, and being open to other people's opinions and experiences, right? And not getting that defensive posture, because we do. We get tense, like, but I didn't mean it. Get over it, right? And so that isn't being thoughtful about someone else's experience, right? And centering our own experience. And so thinking about just being open to it is really what this is about, and the approach, right? And I don't know what will happen. I don't have a crystal ball, but we will continue to do the work that we do, and many other people will continue to do the work that they do in all of their iterations and their organizations and in the community, and because everyone needs each other. We can't just exist on our own. That's not possible. That's human nature. We need each other to exist. And we are richer. Look at all the diversity in this room right now, right? And all of the different opinions and different perspectives. And that made our discussion today that much richer.
I think you made a good point earlier too about knowing your history. Growing up, I saw queer history from a very different lens. The Harvey Milks, the Matthew Shepards of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But if it wasn't for the Marsha P. Johnsons, I wouldn't be here right now. So knowing the history informs you of how important it is to stick up for other groups of people, that intersectionality of it. Because at the end of the day, all of us want the same things: to be loved, to love others, to support each other, and to succeed and be happy.
Right.
So if you don't know your history and you continue to just accept what has been universally taught from the structures and powers that be, you don't put yourself in a better position to advocate for your whole community.
Even history that makes us feel some kind of way, right? And so, we hear that, this is going to make this group uncomfortable. Well, the experience made the people who were oppressed uncomfortable. And so our discomfort in learning about the history is really about being able to move forward in a way that we're not repeating those things and we're not harming more people that we don't want to harm more people. I don't know anyone that says, I want to harm people. I mean, maybe, but I don't know them here, so. But, that doesn't make sense, and so learning, we need to be open to the learning, as uncomfortable as it might be. I always think about, like, it was much more uncomfortable for the people going through that history than it is for me reading about that history. And so we have to keep that in perspective. I do have some book recommendations, some that I've read, some that are on my list, and there are some children's books, because we are never too young to learn about being accepting and creating belonging for other people that are different than us. Our C.A.R.E bill is in the legislature, and supporting that and writing to legislators, calling them and letting them know that this is important to be passed. I don't know, Stella?
What you were saying, like when you're in community and talking with your friends, neighbors, or even new people that you meet, making them feel included, it's kind of supporting the whole idea behind C.A.R.E.
Yeah.
And that, I don't know, sharing your experiences and knowledge with other people.
Yeah.
But from the bill standpoint, absolutely. We're still kind of, so it's been filed by Senator Gomez, and then in the Senate, and then Rep. Altrino and Brett Wen
Altrino, I love him.
in the House. They're still waiting to assign committees.
And coming to our events, sharing opportunities with students. These are opportunities for students from underrepresented communities of color. So sharing with students, sharing our art contest. There's 2 categories, elementary and high school. And so I will share that out. I will send Margaret the links, and sharing the PDs with other educators, all just sharing information and talking to people in the community, and and if people have questions, they can reach out to me. I think Margaret has my contact on the Jacob Edwards page, and people in our community have my phone number, so there's that. But yeah, just having conversations and continuing the conversation and not letting it end here. And reading, please. We have an incredible library. Since I was a young kid that lived on Windsor Court, I would cut through and come to the library, and this was my sanctuary, and I learned so many things here. It opened up my world to other cultures and other communities that, because I couldn't travel, I was a kid, and so, making use of our library and coming here for Black History Month and just supporting all of the programs that we have in our community that are sharing and exposing all of us to different people. So, thank you.